What's up?
Keno, how are you today?
Okay, and you, Dawn?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
I'm well.
I'm really happy to welcome Cece to the show. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Another OG. We got another OG in the network. Familiar
I'm
face.
so excited. Okay. Can we talk about OG and the use of it with me? Anyway.
Okay, what's an OG?
Old guy.
No. Okay, no. I never meant old guy. Okay, on the street,
maybe original gal. Can we do original gal?
On the street, it means old gangster.
Old gangster.
Yeah.
So
but Gen Z has taken it to mean old guy.
Yeah.
I never call anyone
so old. I didn't even know that. So I don't even know what
I also used it with Kelly. Remember with Kelly? I also use it with her because we had OG, old gangster, you know. Like if you go to the hood.
But you meant like an old guest. I thought you meant an old guest.
No.
You know.
It's all gangster. On the street, it's all gangster. So if you go to the hood, you know, just ask who the OGs are. You know, they're going to point you to some dodgy house.
Well, Kelly's like 50. She's hardly an OG. Oh, God.
No, so when I say we got an OG on the show, what I mean is we had someone who's been on the network before.
Yeah.
An old
That's what I'm... Yeah. That's what I'm actually trying
I'm just messing with both of you. And clearly it worked. So
clearly it worked.
Well, I'm sensitive about this sort of thing. As I age, it's not as funny as it used to be.
It's like in the writer's world, Don, I would like refer to you as an OG because you've been a writer for so long.
Okay. See? I hope you're serious.
Yeah.
Okay. But, you know, in some societies, I might point out that being an OG is a position of status where because that person has certain wisdom and knowledge to pass on. And so it's not just a sign of feebleness, but in fact, a position, a sign that this is a person that we can look to for leadership. I'll take that one. I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right about that. So an OG is the smartest one, you know, in the room. You know, and that's where you are going to get a lot of wisdom from because they've been in the game for so long. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Margaret Mead said that really culture didn't begin until people lived long enough to have grandparents, because up to that point, the knowledge couldn't be passed on. Basically, everybody died. You know, and but when we had grandparents who were able to be the repositories of wisdom and could pass it on to generations and that kind of thing. She also pointed out, I think, geez, don't let me get started here, but that again, one of the first signs of civilization was I can't remember how old, but an ancient skeleton that showed a broken bone had been set by someone else. And so this was the first indication that people were working together to heal each other and to sustain each other and a community and in a social situation, which I always thought was kind of interesting. That's my input for today.
Thanks for more wisdom. Always appreciated.
Well, we do have a guest here, you know.
Cece, we do see you. We know you here.
I see you too. It's all good.
Okay, Don, you can jump into the introduction.
Oh, now, okay, all right. Okay, so first of all, let's just introduce Cece. And Cece has a remarkable career. I'm particularly fascinated because we've both worked in West Africa. But she's a writer, an associate pastor, a humanitarian, and she founded an international nonprofit and opened medical clinics, economic empowerment programs, and leadership training initiatives in nations emerging from civil war, which I thought was a particularly interesting focus, because if there's ever societies that need support, it's those that are emerging from the chaos of civil wars, and especially in Sierra Leone. In describing what she wants readers to take away from her books, she writes, "I want to inspire young people to of lives without the artificial walls of our society, and work together to confront evil and oppression. And to that I say, yes, ma'am. That's so consistent with what it is we're trying to promote as well, to find a commonality. So if I can just skip up and then to our sort of introductory blurb here. Langston Hughes, part of the, he was a wonderful Black poet, wrote this back in the 40s. I'm so tired of waiting, aren't you, for the world to become good and beautiful and kind. Let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. I think we all know the world can be and must be a better place if we're going to survive. And so what's keeping us from achieving that better world? And so, Cece, maybe you can expound on that a little bit from your extensive experience.
So I love that poem, and I love Langston Hughes's work, and Maya Angelou's and others who have worked in that same space of using poetry as a vehicle of expressing the deepest longings of our hearts. And when we were working in Sierra Leone, very early on, there was a time when I met a UN peacekeeper. Now, this young man had maybe been in the UN for 2 or 3 years. And so he was young. And I just talking to him, and I said, what's your impression of Sierra Leone? And he said, the people here have not only laid down the weapons in their hands, but also the weapons in their hearts.
Wow.
And that has stuck with me for so long, because I was also going to Liberia, and he's like, yeah, they haven't done that there. They barely laid down the weapons in their hands. And that was true. That was true. There was a time when I saw some of those weapons. But, this young Bangladeshi soldier had struck to the heart of why it's so hard to keep peace, because we don't lay down the weapons in our hearts. And I think the two most dangerous words on the planet are "you're wrong." Mm-hmm. That blanket statement, "you're wrong." Now, there's some at the extremes, like Hitler. Okay. Was there anything redeemable about Hitler? Well, he protected his family. So he's not completely wrong. So when we use those words, "you're wrong," with someone who is clearly evil, it's like we're rendering a judgment that is completely without reversal, without hope. And I've been in situations where there should be no hope, but yet there is. And why is that? It's because people are not saying that you're wrong or you don't deserve to live. They're saying instead, let's figure it out. I don't agree with you. In fact, I agree about 1% with you, and I disagree 99%. But can we build on that 1%?
Well, one thing you talk about with young people not having to operate within the constraints of their social cages. Mm-hmm. I mean, that idea of "you're wrong" is really what kind of defines tribalism, isn't it? Tribalism.
Yes.
It's like, I'm right, you're mm-hmm. wrong. Religious, unfortunately, is one of those tribal divisions, and sadly, one seems it's dialectic. It's mm-hmm. one or the other.
Yes.
We figured out a way. Mm-hmm. To accept the fact that others can have different values without them threatening our own. But I was thinking about when you said that "you're wrong" is right at the heart of our distrust of each other, of mm-hmm. our lack of respect for each other, our mm-hmm. inability to accept new ideas that we're not comfortable with. You're wrong, because the flip side of that is I'm right.
Exactly. Because if you're wrong, then I am right.
And there's not a lot of maneuverability between those two.
Nope.
So what have you seen where the example of the Bangladeshi, interesting too, mm-hmm. from a Muslim background, but where did he, what is it that we need to do to find that space where we can lay down the arms of our hearts and begin to instead see the kindness and love and compassion and all of our hearts.
I would say I would love for that to just be something that we could force upon people, but we cannot. Alas, we can't force anyone to do anything. I can't force you to change. And the older you are, the less likely you are to change.
Yeah.
So we have a few options. There's a malleability in brain function, in the way we think, in the way even our thoughts go through our mind, that is defined in youth. And as they grow up, that becomes less and less malleable. So if you are to tell someone every day for their entire life until the age of 25, you're ugly, unless they have a really resilient self-esteem, those words are going to stick. And there's not much you can do at age 25 other than, like, I've seen miracles happen through God, but that's a rare thing, right? And so if you can get to people's mindset and thinking and attitudes and beliefs at a young age, then they're influenceable. It's a principle that I see now happening in schools, but yet there's still, like, I am very concerned about the book bannings, and I would categorize myself as someone who I probably wouldn't read a lot of the books that people want banned, but I don't want that to be the thing that defines society, that we don't have this ability to read something that we disagree with. Because it's in reading something, it's in being exposed to things that we automatically disagree with, that we then learn compassion and we learn how to grow in seeing the other side.
Yeah, you were saying growing up, as a metaphor, you're constantly being told you're ugly, but if you're also constantly being told you're right, they're wrong, it's exactly and which unfortunately we grow up in those tight little tribal communities that preach exactly that, literally and figuratively, and so it makes it very difficult as we get older to break through those kind of mental limitations, doesn't it? Do you find that in your work?
Absolutely. I mean, I could even bring up a example from Keno's home nation. You're not old enough to have remembered apartheid, but because you're young.
You read about it in school.
You're young, but you were born into a world of turmoil, like that was trying to figure out the way forward. And imagine if you are a young man growing up in one of the townships, and you've never known that you had any hope beyond living in the township and doing exactly what your dad did or your mom. And imagine then thinking, okay, now the world is open to you. Like, it's a very scary thing in a lot of ways. But I mean, some people it's not scary for. A lot of people would be scared by that. And so when you just change things in a dime like that, it takes a little while to unwind the thinking that's ingrained in the culture. Does that make sense?
Generation to generation, it's just filtered down. I mean, I got a lot of friends that stay in the location. Whenever I visit them in the location, I mean, as you said, you just can't change their way of thinking, no matter what you do, no matter what opportunities you bring to them. They just can't see further than what their current life is. And makes me like, okay, what else can I do? I can't, as you said, you can't force it. So what else can I do? You need to be educated in something. Okay, listen to this podcast, read this book. They just don't. They just don't. Self-esteem is at a low. There's no conviction in belief that I can, make something of my life, that I can get out of the location, that I can empower my community by doing so. It's just not there. And I've just simply wall with it.
Yeah. And it's a rare person that willingly goes outside their comfort zone.
It's very true. Intellectually as well as every other way. I mean, to read another point of view that directly contradicts yours, for example. And I'm curious, particularly CC, given that you obviously work professionally and in a lay capacity in the church. So often I see that unwillingness to be open to other ideas, and so often to use the term "you're wrong and I'm right" in a religious context. Explain to me how you help people, make that work.
Yes. So it is a tension, because on the one hand, when you look at the life of Jesus, he loved people. He loved people who hated him. He loved people who killed him. And he loved them in a radical way that I have trouble with. Like, would you love someone who wanted to kill you? Like, I don't know. I probably wouldn't. Like, my natural human tendency is, you're going to kill me? Well, we're going to have some words. So it's going to be a fight, and I'm not going to let you. He not only loved them, but he let them kill him. So you've got that on one hand. And yet on the other, he called out people from their sin. He loved them, but he didn't let them stay where they were. It was almost like, I see where you are in this place. You're comfortable. I love you there, but I'm not going to let you stay there. I'm going to lovingly bring you to a better place. And I think that's what we have to do as pastors, especially me in a multi-ethnic situation. I've known white people that grew up thinking that anyone with a skin color darker than like a moderate tan was beneath them. And then on the other side, I've seen African Americans and others who grew up being taught that anyone outside their ethnicity would hurt them. And yet they end up in my church. I'm like, first of all, you came to the wrong place if you want to stay there, because we're multi-ethnic. So that's going to get challenged. And it is a dance to bring those two types of people together and see racial reconciliation happens. And some of that, the process involves pointing them back to the Bible to say, hey, is that how Jesus would act? Is that what Jesus would think? And it's hard work. It's not easy for either side coming into that center, but it's necessary work. And I've seen people do it, and it's a beautiful, messy, hard thing. It takes a long time and a lot of effort. I've seen people give up and walk away, and I'm like, I can't make you do it. I can't force you to do it. You have to want to live in a way different than the way you grew up.
I think the challenge that I pose to you, rather than is that from a global perspective. I've worked in Islamic countries. I've worked in Buddhist countries. Basically, I consider myself maybe spiritual, but not religious. And that I remember being on a plane. We were flying into northern Ghana, which is predominantly Muslim, and I can't remember why I accidentally sat down by one, and she was a missionary. She was a Christian missionary, and so she was telling me. I said, "Well, that's interesting work. Are you also doing health work?" No, we're just converting them to Jesus. And I said, "Well, what if they don't want to be converted?" And so, well, that's where it gets difficult. She said, because once they're exposed to the truth of the Bible, then and they reject it, well, then they're condemned to hell. And I said, that's pretty arrogant. These folks have done pretty well on their own for a very long time. Belief system that sustained them. For you to go in immediately relegate them to hell because they're not going to buy your religion. I brought a lot of problems with that, and obviously tremendous stress and conflict around the world. I'd say maybe one of the most stressful factors. So what do you do with that?
Well, first, I'm not called a judge. Only Jesus is the judge. So if I'm sitting in the judge's seat, I need to get up and walk out of the courtroom, because it's not my place. Only God can judge someone's heart. So that's point one. And beyond that, my call as a Christian, as a believer, is to love and to speak the truth in love. I don't convert someone. I share who Jesus is, and they either like it or they don't. It's up to them.
And
And I'm not responsible. And I'm not responsible if they say no. That's not on me.
but you, going back to your original comment about I'm right, you're wrong. Are you okay with that then? And saying,
yeah,
they're not necessarily wrong.
I'm
confident in what I believe, but that doesn't necessarily make them wrong.
Yeah. I have members of my family who have told me I'm not interested. Does that mean I love them less? Nope. I still love them. I still support them. I still adore them. It's up to them.
Again, how do we do that then on a societal level where there seems to be so much hatred based around religious division?
Well, and I think it's more than just religious. Pardon me?
Let's reference that question to the Middle East, as an example. It's happening right in front of us.
Oh, yes, right in front of us. Whether the division is ethnic, religious, I don't know. I eat mangoes, you eat pineapples. Like, I don't care what the division between people is. It is not the externals that matter. It is about a state of our heart that wants to say the way I do things is right. The way you do things, if it differs, is wrong. And I have to then, you have to do how I do it. Otherwise, I want to eliminate you. It's an arrogance in some ways of saying that my way is the best and the only way. And maybe also like a lack of proper self-esteem. It's a twisted insecurity that says I need to be validated by other people agreeing with me. Whether it's religious or the way people see other ethnicities or foods we like, you can go on Instagram or especially like the old Twitter and people are arguing about everything. And all that does is it's like clickbait, it just, an argument draws people. We're not interested if people say, hey, everything's great. Like, how boring is that? Like, we as humans, we are attracted to the train wreck, the car wreck. Like, we are like flies to honey for conflict. You have to ask yourself, why is that?
We believe in nothing else. We believe in nothing else except fighting.
The conflict is part of us, but there's other parts of us too, as you say, a desire for stability, for social justice. I think traditionally for about half a million years, we hung out in groups of about 140, working pretty cooperatively. So
I don't know. I think there's been conflict time immemorial.
Oh no, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, but there are other sides to us as humans. I remember one anthropologist talking about he was an evolutionary psychologist, and that it's very possible that we have an innate tendency to distrust the other. And and he was saying, this would make sense, sort of, over 1 million years of evolution. He said, for example, if there's a group that, if there's a tribe that sees this new group of people, it says, oh, look, strangers, let's have them over for dinner. He said, well, that tribe's probably no longer in the gene pool, because there was conflict built in because of shortage, of resources. So if we have that, sort of innate tendency to distrust the other, then it seems to me it goes back to what you're saying early on, that what we have to do is to recognize that and then train that out of people by saying, this is no longer functional. It may have served a function back then, but now it's taking us over to the brink. It's taking us over the brink. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I think that's our default setting, and in the absence of intervention, whether that is education or, in my case, just God changed me. So there's got to be something that happens to change the trajectory of our lives, to get us out of the comfortable and into a place that is maybe initially uncomfortable, and then moving to less comfortable, and then, okay, this is becoming more familiar, to now, like, I can't imagine my life without the multi-ethnic hues
Exactly.
that I have. And I know people, I'm good friends with people who don't believe the same thing I do. That's fine. We love each other, and they know what I think. They know what I believe. I know what they think and believe.
But you enrich each other's lives in other ways. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
just about what you disagree on, but what you agree on as well, and what you find in common. So can we override that innate distrust with human interest, compassion? I mean, is it possible? I mean, we're looking at a world that's so divided.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to South Africa again, because there's an example that I want to bring out. You were alive, Don, when this was all happening, how Bishop Desmond Tutu went and on purpose started relating and sitting down more with some of the white leaders, some of the Afrikaans leaders, and having them collectively come in and talk and building bridges. It takes a person like that who is willing to leave their comfort zone and go across the way to what looks like the enemy and find common ground. Nelson Mandela did that really well as well. After he had taken the presidency, he very intentionally built up a consensus among leaders of all ethnicities, and even some of the less favored ethnicities within South Africa. He built a consensus among a lot of people. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to have one person who's willing to cross that line. If you got one person, you have a chance. You have a shot.
Mahatma Gandhi, Mahatma, yes. Great soul. I mean, it means that person, I think, who embodies what you're talking about, that capacity to transcend our own limitations and find commonalities. You've been through all of that. How is that working out in South Africa? How are we seeing? Are we seeing those divisions begin to break down?
Look, I mean, I lived in a different world in South Africa. I lived in a world where it was, freedom and democracy and an ANC-run government. So I can only give an opinion based on what I've experienced, from where I can remember. I can't give an opinion from apartheid days. There's so many young South Africans these days who are judging the current regime. They're judging the current government because they got nothing to go on from back in the day. So they can come out and say, look, things were better during the apartheid era. There was less crime. Our streets were cleaner. They can, give all those opinions. Do they have the right to give those opinions? I don't know. It's a yes and a no. Because, I mean, the world they were brought in is chaos, So, I mean, then you'll get someone who comes from the apartheid era and they'll be like, things are beautiful, things are great. Some, not all. I've met quite a lot of people as well that lived during the apartheid era and said they wish they were still living in that era. And I'm talking about non-whites. So it's different opinions, that just flows around each and every single day. And that's causing more division, and that filters down from the top, comes from government. They want people to ask these questions amongst each other, So to create a division. Now we got like the ANC and it's, compared to the DA, at each other's heads again. Yet this whole idea of selling a coalition government in South Africa, where's that going? It's going nowhere. It's all just a show. Like, it's chaotic.
Yeah. Let's take that idea for a minute. That there's elements who benefit from division, conflict, lack of unity. Who are they and why? What's that about? Cece, what do you?
Can I just say one more thing, before TC continues, just one more thing, like when I say that, what people need to understand, the masses out there who unfortunately can't wake up and see further than their nose, is that if they don't see for themselves, the predicted chaos and the planned chaos that comes from the top, they want this to happen. My opinion, once again, the higher powers of the world, the powers of the world, they want this to happen because, they want to get, order. They used to sell the problem first, create the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to come with the solution. And the solution, the millions are not going to like that solution. They're going to hate that solution.
Yeah.
You're going to die, you're going to get in prison, or you're going to be controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So who are these people, Cece, that want to, exploit and extend this division and conflict?
Whenever you see division and conflict, you need to ask yourself, who's going to benefit from that? So if we look at, say, for instance, the situation in South Africa, by entrenching each or the population in an either or opinion, they're solidifying a base of political power. There's also likely corporate interests. There's corporations that will gain money. There's political parties that will gain power. People will stay in power. If someone creates a problem and then I have the solution,
right,
that's clearly the person who's benefiting
from that.
So you have to really look at who's benefiting. But there are some people that will stir a pot just to stir a pot for attention. And it's not then they're benefiting, but who is getting the eyeballs of social media, whatever, on them. And even in our current day, so Facebook likes a lot of, I'll just take one social platform. They all operate the same way. If there's a whole bunch of comments on one post and a whole bunch of likes and shares, guess what? That amplifies. And what do people like and share? We are human. We like and share conflict. Oh, I agree with this. This hot take was great. Or can you even believe that he said this? And then a rant about everything. Facebook is agnostic on opinion, but they are very invested in eyeballs in their app. They want to keep you scrolling. They want you to see the ads. They want you to buy something. They don't want you to go off platform. They want to keep your attention. It's the same way in politics and outside in the real world. There are people that they want your attention on that thing. They want you watching whatever news program. They want you online, on the news sources, wherever it is. They want that attention, or it's power or it's money. I mean, there's very few motivations in human life. Greed, the idea of power, the idea of economic improvement, all those things, you got to follow the trail.
There's a couple of things I was thinking about as you were speaking, because I mean, this is troubling to me, and it's also, and this is where the OG, the old guy, is really out of sync, because what you say, I mean, you're absolutely right, and they want to keep it going down that string on any, on a Facebook post. And is it the conflict? Do we have any evidence that that's what keeps people reading? Because if it is, that's pretty devastating. That's pretty shocking, because it's reinforcing that, isn't it? I mean, it's reinforcing, feeding it. It's like adrenaline rush as we get angry, instead of finding some common ground or some way of talking evenly and thoughtfully. We talk angrily and aggressively, and that's what's moving people along. That's a good.
It's one of the things.
And then, of course, the other thing you were saying about, is as far as politicians want you to, I mean, certainly you're very much aware of that, but in Africa, but not just in Africa, because we've got tribes in the United States as well. And so those political tribes line up behind parties. And so certain parties appeal to certain tribes and certain tribal beliefs and tribal myths. And And the more you subscribe to that tribal myth, the stronger you are to. And so I think that's another problem we're having, is that it's not about what's best for people, but what benefits those people in power who can manipulate that conflict, if you will. And then that's another problem, isn't it?
But it's not even the politicians. When I talk about like the powers of the world, I don't refer to politicians. They are just puppets as well. There's people above them. There's families above them. I know one conspiracy theorist video I saw was about 12 families that actually run the globe. And it's 12 families that we don't even know. We never see them. They're not on TV. They're not in the newspaper. I think BlackRock, is more powerful than the US government. These corporations, these are the people behind the scenes. They tell politicians what to do. I mean, how can we be so divided? In South Africa, how can you have 20 political parties and expect there to be order? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to have division. Everyone's going a different direction with different opinions.
So let's go to your point about the economic, that enormous inequality, where the top 1% owns 50% of the world's wealth. So, I mean, obviously, that is a division we don't often want to talk about. And then now we get into another issue. But without removing that inequality, that fear, that greed, that how can we ever level this? How can we ever get beyond conflict? We're constantly scrambling for too little. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? We're really talking about class differences now.
Yeah, it's all about incentivizing. Because if you remove all class differences, there's no incentive to work. And we're so lazy by nature. Human beings are not, maybe some people, like the rare person would actually be like, I need to do something. It'd probably be me, because I'm like an Energizer bunny, ADHD. Like if I'm not occupied, I clean closets, and you don't want me to do that forever. Like I will drive everybody nuts in the house. So like I need something useful to do. But most people are just fine video gaming all day. Like that would drive me crazy. So there has to be some kind of incentive for life improvement. Just leveling the playing field for everybody is not going to fix it, because all it does is change outside. It doesn't change inside. It doesn't affect how you think. And the only way we affect how people think is how they're taught from early on.
But if you're poor, urban, Black, that poverty is going to affect how you think, how you feel about yourself, how you see about your opportunities, your chances. So there are relationships between poverty, wealth, and attitude, and so forth. But I do think that's an interesting point. It's not so much that people don't do anything, but how they do it. Like there's the largest cooperative in the world is in Spain, in the Basque Country, called Mondragon. There's 20,000 people there. Nobody makes more than 3 times anybody else. It's a huge family. The profits go back. So it's not so much that I don't think that it's leveling out as much as finding new ways of being that are less unfair, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the political will is to do that.
Probably not, because that would involve the people in power not being in power.
We have so much power as the masses. We can take them out of power, but we just don't want to. We feel like it's so impossible, yet we can. We are the numbers. We outnumber them, but here we are. Yes sir, no sir. Pay tax, yes sir.
It goes back to the area of comfortability. No matter, even if our life stinks, it's comfortable. We know it.
That's true.
I also feel like all these billionaires going around the world and, buying off land and farms, and they're growing their own food. We need to be careful of all of that. What we eat, even the water, fluoride, toothpaste,
Mhm.
all those things. We need to be careful because it's affecting our brains. We can't think when we consume certain foods. So I feel like at times what they tell you to not eat is what you should eat.
Well, there's some
And
truth
that's
to
all I
that.
feel sometimes.
Food,
Yeah.
costs more of it. But I mean, it seems to me that we need to start thinking as a human species and using the knowledge that's there, and not say who they, but why can't we come together and utilize? There's so much knowledge out there, so many brilliant people, so many
Mhm.
people are doing research that are standing on the shoulders of
Mhm.
generations that have done research on everything,
Mhm.
nutrition, you name it. And now we've got, a Surgeon General in the United States that's rejecting vaccines. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, how do we get here, and how do we get away from it, and how do we
Yeah.
get back to people thinking rationally, thoughtfully, in the interests of the whole instead of the individual. And ultimately, it seems like a lot of it comes down to that, where the individual trumps, no pun intended, everything else, the collective. And I don't know how we turn that around. Like you say, greed. I don't
Well,
know.
the only time that will turn around is when the individual's desires align with the collective desires. And, that's how anyone gets us to do anything, is they align our individual desires with the collective desire.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
But if you can, I mean, if you try to explain that, like like for example, I live in Canada where we have a national health plan. I had a hip replacement. It cost me this much. And if I try to explain to an American what that meant to me financially, that could, I mean, they say, yeah, but that's socialism. It's like, how do we get people to understand? And I mean, that's just one example. And there's thousands of examples from cultures all over the world that are doing things differently that we come from. Wow, I never thought about doing it that way. You've been in so many different countries. Don't you come away thinking, geez, I've been so enriched by this experience and seeing how people do this differently than I do it. I don't come away with the sense that they're, so if you could find some way to consolidate that.
My husband says if he had the money, he would send every American teenager to a developing world nation.
There you go.
And then they'd understand what first world problems are. What really is a first world problem. Like, okay, your video game is broken. Well, boo-hoo. Like, you have food today. That's great. Like, let's look at priorities here. Let's get a little bit of perspective here. I think it's about changing how we view other people, but that can only be done when we get outside our comfort zones.
Absolutely.
And you have to be either dragged out. So I'll tell you what would make us all really uncomfortable. If aliens were real and like all of a sudden, like, a few thousand spaceships show up and they're like, it's us against you. What you got?
Suddenly Team Human.
I mean,
something.
Suddenly Coke versus Pepsi seems completely irrelevant. So what there has to be a common goal or commonality. And oftentimes, unfortunately, that involves a common enemy, because all we've done there is we've avoided war amongst ourselves in order to fight someone externally. That's not good. Do you see? We need the universe to be at peace now. I mean, we could just extend this conversation into space, but the human nature is that we will only unite against a common enemy if it's in our self-interest. And so even when you go outside your comfort zone, you have to realize that at some point, caring about a human being who doesn't look like me, act like me, think like me, believe like me is in my self-interest.
Couldn't agree more. And we're at that point, aren't we? Where, we're in such a precarious position, environmentally, for example, caring about each other, working together, maybe sharing some wealth and knowledge is imperative if we're all going to survive. And I think that's one of the things, I guess, brought me to this whole idea of Team Human, is that we're facing literally as a species existential challenges. I mean, guys, we're either going to get through this together or we're going down together. And personally, I'd rather, pull together and see if we can't figure this out.
In every post-apocalyptic book I've read, at least someone survives. there's at least a few people that survive. So I think even in a situation where, existential crisis, a few people will survive and they'll have to figure it out.
Do you have, and I think it's a perfectly logical place to come at this point, but do you have any hope that there's ways of avoiding that kind of total collapse? Can we find a way to right the ship before it's too late?
That's what I'm trying to do with my writing, actually, is by showing the other side of the collapse, on the other side of, we really messed it up and now our world is in shambles. Our culture is completely changed and we're all oppressed and captive. My hope is by showing that other side, it will motivate changes in the current. That makes sense.
Makes perfect sense to me.
But you know what, when people read the book, it'll be like, oh no, this can't be real. This can never happen. It's like watching the movie Civil War, millions of people have watched the movie Civil War. Oh no, but this can't happen. This will never happen. It's just a movie. We've all heard that before. It's just a movie. Until it happens.
Yeah.
Until it happens. Well, I think I'm with CC. At least we can get people to think.
Yeah.
They can.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it from that point of view, but yeah, we are. One of the films that had the most impact on me in a long time was Don't Look Up. You remember that movie where the asteroid was slamming into Earth?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And everybody knew it. And everybody just said, so finally, instead of trying to cope with it, they just said, don't look up. And at the end, when it finally does, they said, they were holding hands at dinner and they said, we really did have everything, didn't we? Just before and the thing is, we do. You think about the globe, a wonderful, incredible place. And it seems so sad that we can't find the courage and the, for lack of a better term, brotherhood to use our unity to realize the real potential that we've got here. I'm a hopeless.
Yeah. Well, I think we as a nation right now are in what I would call the messy middle of our plot. Where 200 years ago, as Americans, we started off and hoorah, yay, this is going to be amazing. And then we've had a couple inciting incidents that have shown us the reality of who we are. The Civil War, World War II. This is the reality of who we are. We're people. We're messed up. As humans, we're messed up. And whether you say we're in the middle, like trending toward the dark night of the soul or the all is lost moment, I don't know. I think there is a redemption story possible. When you look at the hero's journey, why are we so drawn to that as humans? We're drawn to it because we want to know that there's redemption possible, that the hero solves the problem, that it all turns out right in the end. That is a script as old as time. And we're drawn to it again and again and again. And so I have to trust in my heart that it might look really bad right now, but at some point in time, we're going to figure this thing out.
Like your attitude. I think that's the whole idea of creating Team Human, figure it out and come to, you were talking about sending every American to a developing country to understand what poverty looks like, but also understand what community looks like.
Yes.
And what cooperation and what people can be and the happiness experience without a whole lot of stuff. That's one of the things that I found in me. That in some of the most, remote communities with, in some cases, not even any electricity, people who are happy, living fulfilled, happy lives, they would, come together as a community and wonderful opportunities to share. If I just give me 1 minute, I was going to a community and I we were asked to bring a present to the alcalde, the chief, and the man who was taking us suggested a bag of sugar. So I thought a little 5-pound bag of sugar. What's a chief going to do with sugar? But he said, "Oh no, it has to be can't remember what 20 kilos." So it was like, what the hell? Anyway, we brought it and we gave it to you. We were welcomed into the village, and then we were shown around the village. And when we came back to the alcalde's compound, there was every man in the village there with a bucket, and he was the chief was giving the sugar to every. So it wasn't a gift to the chief; it was a gift to the community, and that sort of community orientation really stuck with me, and that it creates, I think, much of what makes us happy. The social relations that we have. So it's. I know I used to get furious when I come back. I mean, I'd be at a school where kids didn't even have desks, where their parents had to make them desks. They carried them to school. And then I come back. I was working at a college at the time, and people would be complaining because they were limited to 10,000 photocopy sheets a month. I'm going, but it's two different worlds. It's two different worlds.
Yep. And each culture has its good parts.
Yeah.
And each culture has its bad parts. And I've been all sorts of places around the world, and every culture has its good parts, and every culture also has its not so good parts. And when we learn to appreciate the good parts and see the bad parts, even in our own culture, then we can start, okay, let's have a discussion. How can we come together in a way that reflects the best of both of us instead of the worst of both of us?
Well, I think that's a really good way to kind of wind this. How can we do that? I think that we need this world forum on how do we find what's best in all of us.
And it's not impossible. I mean, look at us. 3 of us are in a room together, different backgrounds, cultures. We in the room together. It's not impossible. That's what I failed to understand. My whole life growing up, it was never impossible. I never ever stuck with one group of people. Growing up a Catholic, I never just stick with the Catholics because I was Catholic, or I never stick with Indians because I was Indians. It was diverse my whole life. But it's also, it filtered down the way for my parents as well. So if people are hating on each other, we need to look back as well. What were they taught by their parents? Because it's still out there. I mean, I come across a lot of Indians as well, a lot of South Africans as well, where it's like, oh no, don't socialize with them, don't hang around with them. Even two people from the same religious or cultural background, will be fighting with each other because of financial status. Don't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me. Yet I look at how I grew up. I'm like, I was cool with everyone. I never saw color. I never saw religion. I never ever. So it's not impossible.
Yeah, it's not impossible. But it takes a curiosity and a willingness to go outside of a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And to ask questions. Yeah.
And in a practical way, see, like this idea of having a global forum. I mean, is this the medium we're going to be working with? This kind of,
I don't know, because in my experience, when we say you go solve this, you then have appointed an advocate for your viewpoint. I mean, there have been many economic and world forums about on this very topic about, take any topic, climate change. I mean, just even the situation in the Middle East, there are forums about it. They don't solve anything because it doesn't hit the individual person, doesn't hit you and I sitting in our nations while someone who's appointed by a political leader who's a bureaucrat is elsewhere. That's not going to work. It takes life on life.
Yeah. And
it takes awareness and exposure.
This medium that was not available, I'm talking now like literally what we're doing, sitting in thousands of miles apart, looking at each other. I mean, obviously, it's like any other technology; it has potential for good or bad. But could it be used, you think, to reach that personal? You do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, okay, so the reason why I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all these social media, despite the fact that I really don't like all the arguments, is because I'm not one who stays in their silo. I'm a wanderer. I go and I talk to lots of different people. And so when you have people like you and like Kino, like all of us who don't obey our society's constraints and stay in one place, then we can actually start to see those little seeds of curiosity and of hey, could this be different? I've seen it elsewhere. Maybe things could be different here. And then people, it can be different. I never even thought it could be different.
Exactly.
And when you get them to start asking those questions, it's amazing what people can solve.
I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Once we get them asking those questions. Yeah.
And getting out of your silo.
Yeah.
Well, first, don't get into the silo. That would be the best thing.
Avoid that. And that's a whole other discussion.
A whole other discussion.
But I think, like you said, all three of us have been brought up in silos we're no longer inhabiting. So it can be done.
It can be.
Yeah.
All we can do is just keep pushing the message. That's all we really can do. We can keep coming up, showing up each and every single week, on the podcast, keep writing, the next book or the next article or the next blog, doing your best possible to get it as far as possible. That's all we can do. Consistency pays off. I mean, we all should know that. Consistency does pay off.
Absolutely.
And we'll eventually get in front of people. And even if we get 2 people for a week to start thinking differently, it's enough. At least we got 2 people to start thinking. And hopefully they can go out into their communities. Hey, Cece was talking about this. Dawn said that. That's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, because curiosity is contagious. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are contagious in the world, but curiosity is one of those things that is.
One of the good ones.
Yeah.
And one of the good ones.
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, as you say, once you travel and you realize the enormous diversity of, in the best possible sense, of humanity, and each one is fascinating with its own history, its own subtleties. That I used to tell people I learn less and less every time I go to Africa. I mean, it's because what you're really doing is realizing how much the more there is that you can't even begin to grasp until you're there. It's just so much, and it's so exciting. And just to bring that together and have people curious about each other instead of suspicious about each other.
Yeah, that's true. You see a random guy. I mean, even like in my community, if you see someone that you've never seen before, just like, strolling down the road, you're like, okay, people are like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? Watch out for that guy. Watch out for that guy. Call the police. Like really now, really.
Yeah.
Understand the world is dangerous and there's dodgy people out there, but if that's going to be our first thought each time we're in a new place or see someone different, then, there's no hope for you. But once again, you've been brainwashed to think that way. So we have to reverse engineer your way of thinking.
And we have to work through that. And I like that idea, Cece, you're talking about, particularly in the early grades. I mean, you think about children are born totally selfish, right? I mean, that's their survival mechanism.
Yep.
Eat, but over time, we socialize them into learning how to share and to be with other people and to to be kind, and so they're socialized out of that utter selfishness. I mean, it seems to me we need to do the same thing at this level, out of our distrust of the other, with the same sort of understanding, because that's the way we get beyond it. We don't want to be selfish, although we seem to have a lot of them these days. But anyway, well, it's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you.
It's like if you look at all our conversation, all of our guests that we've had, come on to this podcast, at the end of the show, there is no like the one set solution that we're all going to say, okay, we're going to do now. All we do now is just having the conversation and getting the conversation out there to the masses. So what we're doing.
And that's the wonderful thing about the time we live in, is that I don't have to take a 13-year-old to Jamaica for them to experience another world. There's a Jamaican restaurant right down the street, and I can expose that young person to Jamaican media and music and thoughts online. It's really, we live in an amazing time.
Unparalleled.
Yes, unparalleled. What are we going to do with it?
What are we going to do?
Are we just going to sit fat and happy in our own comfort zone? Or are we going to let ourselves go out? I mean, that's an expression, right? Fat and happy. Are we going to, get out of our silos and expose our kids, those around us, to other ideas, other thoughts, other cultures? That's my last comment.
We live in a global society, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate it.
Instead of fat and happy, I've been telling people, are you going to do something with your life, or are you going to get fat and depressed? That's your two options.
That's funny.
What's it going to be? But it gets people thinking, okay, fat, depressed, is that the way I want to live life? No, of course not. Got to do something with value.
Yes.
Well, that's been a wonderful hour discussion. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to.
Thanks, CC. To be continued. It's always to be continued.
To be continued.
So what we do is we do the one-on-one conversations, and then about every 2 to 3 months we have a panel. So now in the panel is about a maximum of 10 people, that we've had on the show. So that's what, we do like a couple months down the line. So, when the next panel does come, we'll definitely send you an invite and see what's up. I know that you also wanted to be in the conversation with the Afghan girls, but unfortunately, I was going to put you on that Sunday, but then you said you were going to be at church. But, we want to bring them back as well. Yeah. So hopefully when we do bring them back, you can join us for the conversation.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it seems like it's the most interesting people are women. Maybe that's understandable. Seems more and more. Like I said to the Afghani women, I said, look, obviously the thing to do is get the government over to you, the 5 of you. You take it and run with it. You guys look.
Yeah.
Anyway. Don told me the other day, he says we should just interview women.
There's some men doing some good stuff too.
But I also, with all the shows, I love to interview women more. I'm going to put it out there, So, besides the agencies, I also got, the lists where people request, to be on, one of the shows. And I won't lie to you, I check your name first. Okay, lady, let me check them out, lady first. And then if I don't find someone interesting on the list, then I'll be like, okay, let me check the guys out.
True confessions from Keno Isaac.
So you've just revealed an overt sexism in your choice of.
I just get more value. Okay, God no offense to you. You were one of the males I can say who was interesting, hence why we're here today. But I get more value out of women. Just understood. So maybe there's something there. Maybe you're right, and let's go the direction with interviewing more women. Are we going to fulfill this mandate with women than men? Questions to be asked.
Questions.
Okay.
You want to wind this up?
You want to wind this up for us?
Yeah. Oh, Cici, yeah. Any final thoughts? Final, motivation for the masses?
If it's okay, I have an offer for your listeners.
Okay. Yeah. No problem.
I have something free. Free. Everyone loves something free. So if you go to my website, https, all that stuff, ccrobinsonauthor.com/creating, what is it? Creating Team Human, all one word, no caps. You will get my prequel for free, and it's a novella ebook, and hopefully that will help stimulate more curiosity and a little more of willingness to escape the comfort zone.
Yeah.
All right.
Please email me the link, like you did with the other podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's up. And I mean, the good thing is, your books, your content complements this show. So
Yes.
something I would advise, people, listeners to go read. As you said, curiosity.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks, Cece.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, Dawn.